everyone, and welcome. You are watching Eagle News America. I'm Philip Toledo coming to you from Atlanta, Georgia. It's Tuesday evening here, the 15th day of June. We're just about halfway through the month. And as always, we have updates from our correspondents across North America. Joining us live tonight, Thomas Likeness in Edmonton, Alberta.
Waiting lists for priority surgery in Canada grew as a result of the pandemic.
Maricar Borja in North Hills, California.
LA County tells Angelenos, "We made it," as the state fully reopens.
For EBC Sports, EJ Gonzalez in Alexandria, Virginia.
The NBA announces all defensive teams for the regular season, and the Hawks and the Clippers each win Game 4 to tie their series records 2-2.
And for entertainment news, Julie Ann Docena in Las Vegas is with us tonight.
What to watch in theaters now.
Then in Dallas, Susan Husk shares with us the CDC's tips on staying cool in hot weather. Followed by in Union Township, Bureau Chief Carlo Valdez reports about New Jersey being named the best state to live in by WalletHub. In Sacramento, Bureau Chief Angel Membreri reports about California's full reopening. And plus, for tonight's roundtable, it's going to be amusing. It's National Dairy Month, and we'll be talking about how dairy has been part of our kitchen since we can remember. Or maybe not, we'll find out. Our coverage begins now. Russian President Vladimir Putin dismisses accusations that Russia was behind cyber attacks against the United States as farcical in an interview with NBC broadcast on Monday ahead of his summit with President Joe Biden. Putin says he was open to a prison swap with the United States. The fate of prisoners is set to be on the agenda when the two meet in Geneva on Wednesday, and says that jailed Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny would not be treated any worse than anybody else. Biden will attend the summit after a week of meeting allies from the G7, European Union, and NATO, with tensions between Moscow and Washington at their highest in years over a long list of disputes. Asked if Russia was waging a cyber war against the United States, Putin says, "Where's the proof? It's becoming farcical." He says Russia has been accused of all kinds of things, election interference, cyber attacks, and so on and so forth. And not once, not one time did the accuser bother to produce any kind of evidence or proof, just unfounded accusations. U.S. companies, including a major fuel pipeline network, have been hit by cyber attacks in recent months, often forcing temporary shutdowns until ransoms are paid. Meanwhile, China's foreign ministry says the communique put out by the G7 interferes in China's internal affairs regarding Hong Kong, Xinjiang, and Taiwan. Spokesman Zhao Lijian says the U.S. is ill, very ill indeed. The G7 better take its pulse and come up with a prescription. The exchange came a day after the Chinese embassy in Britain hit back at the G7 for political manipulation after the group criticized China's human rights record. In a communique after a 3-day summit in England, G7 leaders slammed China over abuses against pro-democracy activists in Hong Kong and minorities in the Xinjiang region. Human rights groups say China has rounded up an estimated 1 million Uyghurs and other minorities in Xinjiang to internment camps, which Beijing says is to eradicate Islamic extremism. Biden calls for China to start acting more responsibly in terms of international norms on human rights. As well as human rights, tensions have soared between Washington and Beijing on a number of fronts in recent years, including trade, technology, and the origins of the COVID-19 pandemic. Now for more COVID-related news, France on Tuesday expands its COVID-19 inoculation drive to children aged 12 and over in a bid to achieve herd immunity and slow the spread of variants, including the Delta strain, behind a surge of cases in the United Kingdom. The jabs are not compulsory for children and have no bearing on whether they can attend school or go on holiday in France. But as demand for COVID vaccines slows among French adults, the government is hoping that enough children will be immunized and that their parents will also approve to achieve the 80% population coverage that experts believe is needed to halt the spread of the virus. France is also eyeing the spread of the Delta variant that has caused a spike in infections in the UK, despite more than 55% of adults there having 2 vaccine jabs. Prime Minister Boris Johnson has delayed the full lifting of coronavirus restrictions in England by a month over the sharp rise in cases. Health Minister Olivier Véran announces that in France, the Delta variant, which was first detected in India, represents 2 to 4% of new daily COVID infections. In France, a little over 30 million people, 58% of adults, have received at least one dose, but only 27.4% have received the 2 injections needed for maximum protection. After a slow start in the campaign in December, marked by a high degree of vaccine hesitancy, demand for first vaccine shots surged in April and May, but has since begun to taper off. The Institut Pasteur estimates that 80% of the entire population would need to be vaccinated in order for France to achieve herd immunity. Meanwhile, in China, a huge red banner welcomes more than 11,000 students in Wuhan for a massive graduation ceremony over a year after the city was battered by the first global outbreak of COVID-19. Students in navy gowns and mortarboards sit in crowded rows without social distancing or face masks beneath a sign that reads, "Welcoming the graduates of 2020 back home. We wish you all a great future." COVID-19 first emerged in late 2019 in Wuhan, the capital of central China's Hubei province, sending the city of 11 million into one of the world's strictest lockdowns. Restrictions were not eased until April, when the city started to reopen after 76 days closed off, although schools remained shut for longer. The city held limited graduation ceremonies last year, with Wuhan University hosting a mostly online event in June of last year, with the students and teachers who did attend all in masks. More than 2,200 students on Sunday's ceremony were graduates who could not attend their graduation last year due to tight virus restrictions. China has since largely contained the outbreak while keeping precautions high, including tight border controls, quarantines, mandatory online health codes, and varying restrictions on domestic travel. There have been 20 new cases on Tuesday, including 18 imported from overseas and 2 in a local outbreak in a southern province. There have been 4,636 deaths officially reported, the majority in Wuhan. Quoting a line of the ancient Chinese poetry, the banner offered the students advice for the future, quote, "The ocean is boundless for leaping fish." In Spain, an international cruise ship carrying German tourists docked Tuesday in Malaga, south of the country, the first such arrival in more than a year. On June 7, Spain's transport ministry lifted a ban on international cruise ships that had been imposed at the beginning of the coronavirus pandemic in March of last year. The ban was lifted after the virus began to ease in Europe, where most cruise passengers come from, and also owing to rising vaccination numbers. The company spokesman says the liner, which belongs to travel giant TUI, has 1,200 German tourists on board, and all had passed 2 obligatory COVID tests before embarking. There are also 764 crew on board. Carlos Rubio, president of Malaga's Port Authority, says that after 15 months in the ports, which ports have stood empty of waiting for these ships, all are committed to making it an unforgettable experience for the passengers. He says the visitors were being allowed off in organized groups. However, to ensure COVID safety regulations were adhered to. He adds, with these first cruises, the excursions are going to be in bubbles, meaning people won't be able to walk around freely, but he expressed hope that within a few months, as the vaccine progresses, things can get back to normal. Rubio says Malaga was expecting to receive around 50 stopovers this year, describing it as a good start. Now for today's COVID-19 numbers, according to the Coronavirus Resource Center of Johns Hopkins University in Medicine, as of 6 p.m. Eastern Time, Tuesday, June 15, the number of cases of COVID-19 reported worldwide is now over 176,496,000. The countries with the 3 most number of recorded cases are the U.S. with more than 33.4 million, India with more than 29.5 million, and Brazil with more than 17.5 million. The virus has now claimed more than 3,817,000 lives worldwide, with the three countries with the most number of related COVID-19 related deaths are the same. The US with over 600,000, another milestone in COVID deaths here in the country. Brazil over 490,000 and India with over 377,000. Total vaccine doses administered worldwide are now at 2,399,995,615. A Vietnamese conservationist working to save pangolins from the devastating multi-billion-dollar wildlife trade wins a prestigious award for his role in rescuing over 1,000 of one of the world's most endangered creatures. Highly prized in China and Southeast Asia for their flesh, pangolins are seen as a delicacy for the mistaken belief that they can cure anything from impotence to cancer. The director of Save Vietnam's Wildlife, or SVW, has been at the forefront of efforts to raise the alarm internationally about the serious problems Vietnam faces as a major hub for wildlife tracking. He's awarded the Goldman Environmental Prize, known colloquially as the Green Nobel, which honors grassroots environmental leaders who have made sustained and significant efforts to protect and enhance the natural world. 39-year-old Tai says helping people to understand these problems will be an opportunity to attract young people and the Vietnamese community to join in the work of protecting the forest, wildlife, and the environment. Pangolins, often described as anteaters, are defenseless in the wild, curling up into a ball when they are frightened, allowing poachers to easily gather them up. Tai says based on figures from investigations and images from camera traps, it can be said that pangolins wild in Vietnam have decreased more than 90% in the last 15 years. Summer weather is here, and the Centers for Disease Control share tips on how we can all stay cool and safe in extremely hot weather. Eagle News correspondent Susan Husk files this report.
Thank you and howdy from the Lone Star State. Now that school is over and summer is here, so are the rising temperatures. During this month of June, many parts of the country have seen an increase of heat waves. To help you and your family stay cool and safe, here are some tips from the Centers of Disease Control. Stay cool when outdoors by wearing lightweight, light-colored, loose-fitting clothing. When indoors, stay in an air-conditioned place as much as possible. If your home does not have AC, go to the shopping mall or public library. Even a few hours spent in air conditioning can help the body stay cooler when you return to the heat. Check your local health department to see if they have heat relief shelters. Electric fans may provide comfort, but if the temperature is in the high 90s, they will not prevent heat-related illness. Take a cool bath or shower and try to avoid using the oven or stove to keep your house cooler. Limit your outdoor activity to morning and evening hours. Rest in shaded areas frequently so your body has a chance to recover. Reduce exercise in the heat. If exertion in the heat causes your heart to pound and leaves you gasping for air, stop all activity. Go to a cool or shaded area immediately and rest, especially if you become lightheaded, confused, weak, or faint. Wear sunscreen because sunburn affects your body's ability to cool down and can make you dehydrated. If you must go outdoors, wear a wide-brimmed hat, sunglasses, and use sunscreen of SPF 15 or higher 30 minutes before going out. Look for sunscreens that say broad spectrum or UVA UVB protection on their labels. These products work best. Never leave children in cars. Vehicles can quickly heat up to dangerous temperatures, even when the window is cracked open, and can cause heat strokes or even death. Avoid hot and heavy meals. They add heat to your body. Stay hydrated with lots of water and fluids. Don't wait until Thursday to drink. These are just a few tips to protect you and your family from heat-related illnesses. Those who are at greatest risk are infants and young children, people 65 years of age or older, people who are overweight, people who overexert during work or exercise, and people who are physically ill with heart disease or high blood pressure, or who take certain medications. For more information, visit cdc.gov. Meanwhile, I hope you are staying cool and safe this summer. In Dallas, Texas, I'm Susan Husk, Eagle News. We live in interesting times.
Thanks, Susan. Up next, we'll have reports from Alberta, Canada, and California. Eagle News America continues. Stay with us.
Factual.
We have to defeat the virus everywhere.
Timely information. Balanced, not only in the country, but also abroad.
I'm certain of one thing.
Interviews that people need to know. Watch Agila Pilipinas, a 1-hour newscast of reports coming from regional hubs in Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. Know the important updates in Asia in ASEAN in Focus. Track the latest stories in the provinces in Agila Provincia. Tune into Mata ng Agila, the evening primetime news program of Net25. Balanced and objective, Mata ng Agila covers national and international issues, tackles news on business, health, science and technology, entertainment, sports and human interest features, and current events. And Eagle News International delivers the latest global reports, impartial, accessible, and up-to-date. It brings to fore EBC's rich international scope and access to valuable information streams.
Well, thank you to thank our health outdoor
Catch these programs on Net25. You can also watch our news programs through eaglenews.ph and Eagle News Facebook page and YouTube channel.
Welcome back. You're watching Eagle News America. I'm Philip Toledo in Atlanta. Now, in Canada, the list for those awaiting priority surgery have grown long because of the pandemic's impact. In Alberta, Bureau Chief Thomas Likeness is with us this evening with more details. Thomas?
Thanks, Philip. Well, you know, the finding is no surprise, but it's no less painful for the people who are affected. Now, last year, in the early months of the pandemic, hospitals were limiting care to COVID-19 patients and only emergency procedures. So that meant people needing things like, well, say a hip or a knee replacement. Well, they had to live with the pain longer. Cataract surgery was delayed, so people had to manage with compromised vision. A study by the Canadian Institute of Health Information says about half of Canadians did not receive their procedures within the recommended time frames. Now, that compares to around 1/3 not receiving those procedures a year earlier in 2019. Now, keep in mind, waiting lists are a fact of life up here in Canada. We have universal health care, and although that means there's no copay for medically required procedures, it can mean waiting until you can be accommodated. But you know, no matter where you go in the world, health care is rationed. In some countries, it's rationed by your ability to pay. In others, like here, well, we do it with waiting lists. So anyway, we've talked about priority surgeries, but how did the pandemic affect urgent procedures in Canada? Well, the Institute says patients requiring things like radiation therapy or hip fracture repair, that work was done within the benchmark timeframes. And it adds that the number of urgent procedures done during the pandemic last year was about the same as the year before. So, demand didn't vary at all there. For Canadians who needed cancer surgery for breast, bladder, colorectal, or lung cancer, wait times actually improved by a day or two. And that could be due to a fewer elective procedures being done. These findings, again, reflect the wait times for patients who had their procedures done between April and September of last year and provide comparisons with the same period from the previous year. But, as we get back to normal, the challenge for the Canadian healthcare system will be to deal with that huge backlog of surgeries. There's tens of thousands of procedures that have been put on hold for over a year now, over 15 months now. And although we have enough operating room capacity, the challenge is going to be having enough surgeons, enough anesthesiologists, nurses, and other healthcare support staff so that we can efficiently augur our way through the waiting lists. In Edmonton, Canada, Thomas I. Likeness, Eagle News. We live in interesting times. Back to you, Philip.
Thanks, Thomas. Now, when we talk about healthcare issues, we can't avoid talking about, the battle against COVID-19. What's Canada's latest effort to overcome vaccine hesitancy?
Well, the government today announced that it's produced a series of short videos with experts to answer some of the common questions that people have about vaccines. Now, these are aimed at people who are unsure of the safety of vaccines. Maybe I should wait a while. Maybe I don't need it. I'm young, I'm healthy. But there are also other people who question, like I said, why do I need to be vaccinated? I can fight things off. But is that true? You see, the big problem we have up here now is that Delta variant. That's the variant that originated in India. And this variant is so troublesome because it's more contagious. And if you're infected with it, you have a greater chance of landing in the hospital than you would if you were infected with the original variant of the virus. And this applies even to younger people. Now, the ads also stress the importance of getting that second shot. Research has shown that one shot doesn't offer much protection against the Delta variant. The immunity has to be reinforced with that second jab. These ads, incidentally, will be running on regular television as well as websites and social media, so they should get really good coverage. Philip?
And how much of the population has actually been vaccinated, Thomas?
Well, and you've heard me rant about this before. At the beginning of our vaccine rollout, we had such a supply problem, but things have drastically improved. Earlier this spring, there were a lot of arms waiting, but all we had was empty syringes. The rollout has really taken off. And in fact, Canada now leads the world in the percentage of its population having received first doses. Figures from the government this morning show nearly 3/4 of the population over the age of 12 has received at least one dose, and it's expected by the weekend will reach the Prime Minister's target of having 75% of the population having a first dose and 20% being fully immunized. So all in all, we're on the road to immunity, herd immunity, but it's that last stretch that's going to take some effort to push us over the 80% rate. Again, we want to reach the people who are hesitant. The others, the 10%, the anti-vaxxers, I'm afraid you can't reach them at all. Philip?
In speaking of that, what appears to be the biggest predictor on, whether someone will be vaccinated?
Well, there's some interesting data that's floating around from Alberta Health Services, Philip, analyzed who is getting vaccinated, and they delved into things like income, language, cultural background, and found these things really didn't play a role in vaccine hesitancy. The big factors seem to be education, I should say. The more educated people are, the more open they seem to be being immunized. But sociologists aren't sure why that is. Now, this high correlation doesn't mean education prompted a person to get vaccinated. You've got to be careful with correlations. I think back to my days in university. I had a statistic professor point out that there's an extremely high correlation between an increase in a person's IQ and the number of wisdom teeth that have grown in. But that doesn't mean IQ is related to wisdom teeth. It's just a coincidental occurrence. And that's the same thing they want to figure out with education and vaccination. You know, it's an interesting finding, but are they related? Well, it's something the tall foreheads will want to study more. Philip?
Thanks, Thomas. And that's right. Correlation doesn't always mean causation. So thank you so much for joining us, and we'll catch up with you at the roundtable here at the end of our show.
I look forward to it.
It's official. The Golden State has fully reopened. Now, what does this mean in detail? In Sacramento, Bureau Chief Angel Membrere has the report.
Thank you. Today, California has fully reopened after closing 15 months ago due to the COVID-19 pandemic. This means that there is no need for social distancing, capacity limits for different businesses or sectors, and for those who are fully vaccinated, no need to wear masks. Governor Newsom explains how today is a day for celebration. Let's listen.
Today's about reaching out, the serendipity of life, meeting strangers, having the opportunity to experience all the wonders of the world that are here at Universal Studio. Today is a day to celebrate the incredible journey we've been on over the course of the last 15 months. It is also a humbling moment, as the Assembly member said, because it's been a tough journey for tens of thousands of people that have lost their lives. And we're mindful this disease is not taking today off. It's not going to take the summer months off. This disease remains as deadly as it's ever been. You're seeing what's happening around the rest of the world. Ask the folks in India, Brazil, ask the folks in parts of Europe, including the UK yesterday, because of the variants, are delaying their reopening by an entire month because of the Delta variants. So we're going to continue to be vigilant. We're going to continue to be mindful about those changing realities. As I said, we're not spiking the ball, but today is a day to celebrate. Today is a day to, reconnect with strangers, loved ones, family members, give people hugs, remind them we're not out of the woods, and also remind them we're all in this together. And we've got a lot of work to do because I said this, and I'll close. We're not just coming back. We're going to come back more focused on inclusion, more focused on equity, and we're going to come back roaring back.
Governor Newsom explains that even though California is reopening, we still need to be mindful of the people around us. He explains more about this. Let's listen.
We are mindful and sober that we need to continue to encourage people to get vaccinated, and we need to encourage people to be thoughtful, to be judicious, mindful of these mutations, mindful of the variants all around the rest of the world, mindful that not everybody is doing as well as the state of California. And we have people traveling from all around, not only the country, but around the world, coming to venues like this. We need to keep our guard up. We can't let our guard down. And that's why we do encourage people in mass, large events to just be thoughtful, particularly those of you that have not been vaccinated, to wear face coverings, just to be thoughtful in terms of the nature of this disease and this pandemic.
In Sacramento, California, Angel Membrere, Eagle News, we live in interesting times.
To come, we'll have more updates from California, New Jersey, and tonight's EBC Sports. Eagle News America will return in just a moment. Stay with us.
Events happen around us all the time, in our community, in our country, around the world. Events that affect people, move communities, or simply inspire us. Interesting events that people need to know. In these interesting times, we continue to be a competent partner in delivering news about these events. Fast, accurate, balanced. Eagle News, because we live in interesting times.
Hindi mo ba alam, mauubos daw ang mga tissue products? Bakit naman? Ang raw materials daw ng mask at tissue products ay iisa lang. Saan naman galing ang balitang yan? Ay basta, narinig ko lang din. Maraming diling kayang nagpo-post sa Facebook at Twitter, kaya kung ako sa'yo, pumuha ka na din. Sige na't mauna na ako sa'yo
Huwag basta-basta magpaniwala
sa mga nakikita
o nababasa sa social media.
Magsaliksik at i-verify ang lahat ng impormasyon
Nakukuha sa internet.
Tandaan,
maging responsable tayo
sa paggamit ng social media
nang hindi magdulot ng panic sa iba.
Kung paanong dapat labanan ng COVID-19.
Ay gayon din ang ating pagsugpo
sa black propaganda
at maling impormasyon.
Dennis Lu,
Lou Omelda,
Luigian Alfartosa,
Tyranel Pililu,
Hannibal Arevalo,
EBC,
Japan, Euro. We live in interesting times.
You're watching Eagle News America. I'm Philip Toledo. Los Angeles County is in celebration mode as California State fully reopens. In North Hills, Mayor Car Borjas shares with us the county's health officials' reminders for Angelenos and how residents feel about this milestone. Mayor Car?
Thank you, Philip. Los Angeles County Health Services greets Angelenos today. Happy reopening, Los Angeles, as the county tweets, "It's been a long and tough road to reopening, but we've made it." Let us hear from LA Public Health Director Barbara Ferrer, who was on site today at the Music Center in Los Angeles with other county officials to commemorate this historic reopening milestone. Let's take a look.
Across LA County, we are able to come together to commemorate this milestone with a sense of relief and optimism in our hearts. Everyone can remove their mask outdoors. The only exception are people who are not fully vaccinated, who are attending large outdoor events. These folks should stay masked. I want to close by letting you know that all of us at LA County's Department of Public Health remain committed to protecting your health and to closing gaps in health outcomes associated with COVID-19. Case counts and transmission are low because of our shared efforts to implement a layered approach to preventing transmission. As we reopen, we're mindful that for those not yet vaccinated, protection is highly dependent on our continued collective efforts to be smart about protecting each other. As safety measures are lifted, we remain joyous but vigilant, and we're ready to respond to any new challenges that arise.
Los Angeles County revises and updates its public health order to align with the state's June 15 reopening guidelines. What does this mean for Los Angeles residents? Businesses in all sectors of the economy can fully reopen as the color-coded tiers of the state's blueprint recovery map have been retired and no longer effective. There are no more requirements for physical distancing and no more limitations on capacity. But county public health officials urgently remind those not vaccinated to continue to exert care and caution against COVID-19. Young residents throughout the county and state voices their opinions and reactions to this reopening of California and Los Angeles. Let's also take a look.
With California opening up, a part of me feels relieved that there's some normalcy coming back, but another part of me is nervous still because as far as I know, only half of Californians are vaccinated and young kids cannot get the vaccine yet. So even if I want to go out, I'm still nervous about, is there potentially someone who isn't vaccinated, or is there a kid who probably doesn't have control where they could go? So I'm still nervous, for sure.
I don't think it should be like a sudden reopening. I think it should be a somewhat regulated one with limits on how many people can be with one person, on who can have their masks on. And I definitely think that it's necessary for people to continuously encourage other people to get vaccinated, because without the vaccine, we're not going to be able to go back to a fully normal life again.
So in regards to California reopening today, although I think California was relatively successful in its vaccination efforts, I'm not exactly sure if the same can be said for the rest of the country, so that's still an issue. There are still a lot of pockets of unvaccinated people throughout the country. So that's just something that we still have to be a little bit more careful about.
Now that California is reopening, I feel as though some people will try to forget that the pandemic happened and that they will try to feel like things are back to normal. However, things are not back to normal. So I hope that everyone will remember that the pandemic happened and that even though the numbers have gone down quite a bit since the pandemic started, that everyone will still proceed with caution as it reopens.
I'm really glad that California is opening again because the arcade, I can have fun. I can go to restaurants. I can go grocery shopping, and it's gonna be pretty good.
I think that the reopening of California is pretty exciting, but at the same time, I think people should stay safe because the vaccine doesn't necessarily prevent a person from getting COVID, but it just minimizes the impact.
With regards to face coverings or masks, you are no longer required to wear them if you are fully vaccinated. But there are exceptions to this new health guideline. You are still required to wear face coverings, whether fully vaccinated or not, when taking any form of public transportation and also at their stations, ports, and hubs. These include airplanes and airports, trains and train stations, buses and bus stations, ships and seaports, and taxi cabs. And the face covering or mask requirement still applies for all the following environments: educational or schools from kindergarten to grade 12 include childcare and youth centers, healthcare facilities, state and local correctional and detention centers, and homeless, emergency, and cooling shelters. Anyone that are still unvaccinated, including children ages 2 to 11 years old, must continue to wear face coverings when inside business and public locations, like retail stores, restaurants, and movie theaters. So when outdoors, everyone may opt to not wear a face mask, but if you are attending a large outdoor gathering and you are not vaccinated, a face mask is again required. In North Hills, California, Mari Carborja, Eagle News, we live in interesting times. Back to you, Philip.
Thanks, Maricar. Now, can employees in workplaces now stop physical distancing from one another since this full reopening of the state and county took place?
Actually, not yet, Philip. Employees in the various workplaces of LA County are still under a set of requirements from the California Occupational Safety and Health Standards Board, or Cal OSHA. So employees must still continue to wear their mask and practice physical distancing under the Cal OSHA protocols, but modifications will be made as early as this Thursday when the Cal OSHA Standards Board will meet and vote on these issues. Philip?
Thanks. And, before we let you go, we've heard some of the reactions of Californians and Angelenos regarding this full reopening. But what about you? What are your thoughts on this? And how do you feel about California, LA included, fully reopening today?
So basically, much like the young residents in the video we just watched, I feel somewhat relieved, but mostly excited. As a university student who didn't really come back to school my sophomore year, and as a rising junior, I'm excited to go back to university and actually be in school and see my friends and hopefully go and hang out with my friends and maybe go to different, travel with them or even attend concerts since they're coming back up again.
Absolutely. Well, I know that's very exciting, and good luck, I guess, in your rising junior year. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll catch up with you here at our roundtable in a few minutes. Meanwhile, New Jersey is WalletHub's best state to live in for the year 2021. In Union Township, Bureau Chief Carlo Valdez tells us more about the key dimensions used for the selection.
Thanks, Philip. WalletHub, an analysis and financial website, released its 2021's Best States to Live in list on Tuesday. WalletHub compared the 50 states, which were based on 5 key dimensions: These 5 dimensions are affordability, economy, education and health, quality of life, and safety. WalletHub also lists New Jersey at number 4 for lowest crime rate. The other states in the top 3 for best states to live in were New York at number 3 and Massachusetts at number 2, respectively. And as for coronavirus stats and numbers, New Jersey reports of 278 new positive PCR tests, pushing the total to 890,485. Sadly, New Jersey is reporting 11 new confirmed deaths, pushing the total to 23,660 lives lost. In Union Township, New Jersey, Carlo Valdez, Eagle News, we live in interesting times. Back to you, Philip.
The NBA playoffs are living up to fans' expectations. EJ Gonzalez gives us an update on the series between the Atlanta Hawks and the Philadelphia 76ers and the LA Clippers versus the Utah Jazz. He'll also fill us in on the latest NBA awards news. EJ.
Thanks, Philip. Yeah, before we get into NBA playoffs, let's update you on the latest NBA awards. So the NBA has named the 10 players who will make up the all-defensive first and second teams. Each team is composed of 1 center, 2 guards, and 2 forwards, and the winners are voted by a global panel of 100 sports writers and broadcasters. These were the players who were selected. For the all-defensive first team, Rudy Gobert, who was this year's NBA Defensive Player of the Year, and Ben Simmons, who was runner-up for Defensive Player of the Year, cemented their spots in unanimous fashion. Gobert and Simmons each received 100 total first-place votes from the panelists. Draymond Green of the Golden State Warriors and both Giannis Antetokounmpo and Jrue Holiday of the Milwaukee Bucks round off the NBA All-Defensive First Team. All-Defensive Second Team is composed of Kawhi Leonard of the Los Angeles Clippers, Miami Heat players Bam Adebayo and Jimmy Butler, and the Philadelphia 76ers Joel Embiid and Matisse Thybulle. So all these players have made an all-defensive team appearance before, except Matisse Thybulle, who makes his debut as a sophomore in the pros. Now for your roundup on the latest in the NBA playoffs. Last night, both the Atlanta Hawks and the Clippers came into their series down 2-1 with a chance to tie up the series, and these two teams did exactly that. Let's start with the Eastern Conference, where the Hawks hosted the 76ers in Atlanta. This game was really a tale of two halves. The Sixers looked to have all cylinders rolling in the first half and led by as much as 18 points. Joel Embiid was dominating while Trae Young was struggling offensively. However, the Hawks came rallying back in the third quarter, and the game went down to the wire in the fourth. Embiid went 0 for 12 in the second half and missed a crucial layup that would have given the Sixers the lead in the closing seconds of the game. Trae Young scored the Hawks' final 6 points and finished the game with 25 points despite his slow start and playoff career high of 18 assists. Atlanta won Game 4 with a total score 103-100, tying up the series 2-2. And in the Western Conference, the Clippers looked to even the series against the Utah Jazz. The Jazz took an early 2-0 start in this series, but the Clippers bounced back in Game 3 and looked to find that same success again in Game 4. The Jazz won the tip. Bojan Bogdanovic scored the first basket of the game, but this lead was short-lived and the only lead that the Jazz had the rest of the entire game. After that first bucket, the Clippers went on a 10-0 run and never looked back. The Clippers led by as many as 29 points in the game, led by their superstars Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, who combined for 62 total points. But the biggest highlight had to come from Kawhi Leonard when he dunked all over Derek Favors in the second quarter. Now, Donovan Mitchell, he continued his historical scoring run, recording 37 points on the night. He has put up at least 30 points in the last 6 playoff games for the Utah Jazz. The final score for this one was Clippers 118, Jazz 104, as the series heads back to Utah in Game 5, all squared at 2 games each. In Alexandria, Virginia, EJ Gonzalez, Eagle News, we live in interesting times. Back to you, Philip.
Thanks, EJ. Now, before we let you go, we hear that there's some additional news that the NBA released moments ago. What can you update us with?
Yeah, no, literally just moments ago, like about an hour ago, it was announced that the NBA made an official release naming the players who made the All-NBA first, second, and third team. I'll run down the list for you. For the NBA first team, Giannis Antetokounmpo, it was a unanimous decision for him. Stephen Curry, Luka Doncic, and Nikola Jokic, as well as Kawhi Leonard, make up the All-NBA first team. The All-NBA second team is composed of Damian Lillard, Joel Embiid, Chris Paul, Julius Randle, and LeBron James. And then the All-NBA third team, my guy, Bradley Beal, Jimmy Butler, Paul George, Rudy Gobert, and Kyrie Irving. So those 15 players make up the All-NBA first, second, and third team. Philip?
EJ, well, thank you so much for all of those thorough updates on the NBA tonight. We'll catch up with you here in just a few moments. Up next, we'll have entertainment news with Julianne and today's roundtable, Dear Dairy. Eagle News America will return in just a moment. Stay with us.
Hey there, Arnie Aquino here at Hatley Castle, one of the filming locations for the X-Men series. Don't forget to tune in to Digital Nest only on Net 25.
It's time to head over to Julianne in Las Vegas for a look at movie options for the week. Julie?
Thank you, Philip. Out in theaters today is The Hitman's Wife's Bodyguard, an action comedy that makes it a great option for date night. Like all action movies, it has its share of violence and a dangerous plot, but you may be surprised to find that this sequel includes underlying messages and value points for all of us. Pay attention, Kay.
Hey there, future Michael. It's today, Michael. I think you'd be proud to know that the sequel builds on the first movie in a delightful way. Sometimes it can be terrible because a sequel will just sort of exploit all the great things about the first movie and then reiterate them again. This movie doesn't do that. It sort of hijacks the tone and the sentiment in a great way, but gives life to so many more new and wild elements.
I know you. Don't I know you? I'm Sonia Kincaid. The mafia took my husband. We have to go get him. No. I can't.
If you didn't see the last one, it doesn't matter. The film stands on its own. But if you saw the last one, it's more about how this relationship evolves. And it's not just the action, but it's really about the relationship.
The connection between Ryan and I, only gets better because, the more time we spend together, the more we know about each other, the more we hate each other in a way that, makes sense.
I'm this exasperated straight man who's just had enough, and Sam kind of brings this mercurial crazy element, and then Selma just next levels that. So, we're really sort of filtering the narrative through the prism of Bryce's kind of viewpoint and experience of these two people who are literally made for each other. They're crazy, his crazy matches her crazy and vice versa.
No killing. No guns, and no blood. Boring is always best, understood?
She continues to amaze him in terms of, I thought Darius was crazy, but wow. So she continues to surprise, but she also continues to draw him in a way, because she truly wants to love him or wants him to understand that she cares about him.
I'd love the audience to take away a sense of fun and adventure, and that ultimately family's really important, and it's the people we love at the end of the day that matter most. It's also about a young man that is in dire need of a strong father figure, and he's never had it and has always wanted it. And what do we want from all our father figures is validation. And I think ultimately that's what the film's about.
Two crooks in love and what that is. Seeing them together and the joy that those two people have being together and who they are and what those personalities mean and the lengths that they'll go to stay together, you know, is the excitement for me of what happens.
I love their love story. You know, it's fantastic to be watching a movie that is a love story, even it's an action movie. And it's about staying in love, not falling in love for the first time, but staying in love for a long time.
That's the key to the action comedy genre, and certainly with the buddy action comedy genre. You know, you can have these characters at ultimately at different ends of the spectrum, but they all each have a quality that they need to learn from one another. And so it's, in a sense, it's a love story. And it ends happily ever after, so, you know, like all good family films. Except this film is not PG rated.
Please remember that. Even though it highlights the importance of commitment and family, it's still not the best choice if you're watching with kids. For families watching this weekend, consider Fatherhood. It will be out this Friday on Netflix. Fair warning, everyone, you may need to break out some tissues as we watch a widowed father cope with the fear, insecurity, and chaos parenting can bring.
I need help. I need the crying to stop. How do I make the crying stop?
Kevin Hart takes on a more serious role in fatherhood as a newly widowed father struggling with loss while mitigating the never-ending ups and downs life with a newborn brings. It sheds light on the struggles that single fathers face in a world still predominantly focused on mother-baby care. Heartwarming and real, each win that Hart's character wins feels like a win for all of us.
Look, I know I ain't perfect. I know that. I'm actually nothing.
You're not a joke. Maddie's doing great. She's moved up to the 60th percentile in weight and 70th in height. Look, I hope you don't mind me saying this, but your wife would be very proud of you.
Of course, as is always the case with kids and new parents, there's also a lot to laugh at, and we can always expect Hart to make the most of those moments. So whether you'll be using the tissues to laugh or cry, I'm not sure. But I am sure fatherhood will give us a better appreciation for the efforts our dads make in our lives. In Las Vegas, Julianne Docena, Eagle News, we live in interesting times. Back to you, Philip.
So speaking of movies, June is National Dairy Month. Dairy or milk products are dairy or milk products that a lot of us consume might be yogurt, cheese, butter, ice cream, whipped cream, heavy cream, lots of cream, sour cream. So let's talk to one another tonight about if we had to write a note to dairy products, what would you tell them? A dear dairy, if you will. It looks a lot like diary, but tonight it's Dear Dairy. Thomas, how about you? What would be your letter to dairy products?
Okay, I just quickly penned this heartfelt epistle here. Dear Dairy, I hope you don't find this letter too cheesy. I'm not trying to butter you up, but this thought is churned around in my mind. I just want to tell you, you are the cream of the crop. Way to go! Now, I won't be cowed by any of those animal rights types who say we should not consume dairy products. That attitude just makes my blood curdle. I know I've only skimmed the surface of this topic, but I don't want to milk this subject any longer, so I'll sign off for now with utter sincerity, your friend at EBC, Tom.
So, EJ, I know you wish I would have asked you before Thomas.
Oh, yeah. How do you follow that up? That was a work of art, Tom. Great job.
It was. We'll give him a round of
yeah, please.
No. That goes for the first frontliners, the first responders. They deserve it.
Definitely. Well, I that's an award-winning personification or a cool letter, definitely for dairy. I don't know how I could top that. If I were to write a letter to Derry, I don't know. I'd be like, dear Derry, thanks for making me so gassy. Honestly, I think I'm one of those people who are self-diagnosed lactose intolerant. I try to avoid cheese as much as possible, but we actually got a panini maker recently, and we use Munster cheese. I don't know if you guys ever heard of that Munster cheese, but it's so good. I only have one slice, but my wife, she likes 2 slices. It's that good. So if you guys want to try a new type of cheese, Munster cheese is the way to go.
Absolutely, and you got to live it up. Might as well do 2 slices. Julie, how about you? What is your letter to Derry?
I just don't see how I could write a better letter than Thomas wrote. But, you know, I guess if I had to say thank you to Derry, I would say, dear Derry, thank you for butter, because butter makes everything better. So that's what I would say. Although, you know, dairy makes everything taste better in every format, even just heavy cream, milk. You know, my coffee tastes great thanks to dairy. My pasta tastes great thanks to dairy. My seafood tastes great thanks to dairy. So basically, it'd be the same as EJ. It would just be a big fat thank you to dairy.
Just make sure the butter isn't bitter.
That's true.
Yes. Marikar, what about you? What's your letter to dairy?
Let's see. I would probably say, dear Dairy, thank you for being with me for 19 and a half years of my life, even though we broke up around 6 months ago, and I have moved on from regular milk to almond milk for health and skin purposes. But I still continue to see you on the weekends when I have ice cream and pasta and ramen when I cook.
Can we still be friends?
Yes, sure. Yeah, I forgot to add that part.
And that's kind of interesting because, I think my letter would be a little bit, everyone seems to be saying thank you. I guess I have more of a love-hate relationship with dairy because, cheese and ice cream, it just goes with every meal maybe not ice cream with every meal of the day, but you could, maybe if you were on vacation. But, the resulting of that is, a lot of calorie intake. And I would just ask dairy to be better. Dear dairy, can you please be better for me? Or something like that. So, to Thomas, I think you've stumped us all this evening with your utterly incredible. I know that's a little bit of a stretch. Your amazing letter to dairy, but there is a group of people aside from dairy that we have to make sure that we thank every time before we end our show. Especially, we've had a lot of conversations about how restrictions are easing. We're coming to the end of the pandemic, and we couldn't have made it anywhere near as far as we have without our frontliners, our essential workers, first responders, and healthcare workers. Thank you so much for all that you do. We give you a tremendous round of applause. Well, that is it for tonight's Eagle News America. We thank you so much for joining us. Wherever you are in the world, we hope that you're staying safe, you're staying well, and maybe have a glass of warm milk before you go to bed tonight. I'm Philip Toledo. We live in interesting times.